1938. 100 members of the Ku Klux Klan surrounded a black-owned ranch in the Mississippi Delta with rifles, rope, and a written promise from the sheriff that no one would interfere. Their target was Elijah Mercer, a fat, limping landowner they mocked as too slow to run and too scared to resist. They counted their numbers aloud, argued over who would light the fire at dawn, and accepted his offer to sign away the land. Certain greed had won. By the next morning, the county had a different problem. Some Klansmen were dead. Others were missing. Several swore they'd been shot by their own men. Hoods came off. Names were spoken. Careers ended. The mob's confidence collapsed into silence, and no one could explain how a man they'd come to erase was still standing. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The last rays of sunlight painted long shadows across Elijah Mercer's cotton fields. His massive frame moved with deliberate slowness as he gathered tools from the day's work, each movement careful and measured. The limp in his right leg was more pronounced after hours of labor, forcing him to pause every few steps as he made his way toward the barn. At 6'4" and nearly 300 pounds, Big Eli was impossible to miss, yet he had mastered the art of seeming smaller than he was. He kept his shoulders hunched, his eyes downcast, and his voice soft when speaking to white folks in town. They saw what they wanted to see, just another aging colored man, too simple to be a threat, too slow to be anything but pitiful. The evening air hung heavy with late summer heat as Eli secured the barn doors. His isolated ranch sat on 20 acres of the richest soil in the Mississippi Delta, bordered by cypress trees and darkness. No neighbors for miles. No one to hear anything that might happen out here. He'd chosen this land carefully, 15 years ago, knowing isolation cut both ways. Crickets chirped their evening song as Eli collected eggs from the henhouse. His rough hands, gentled by practice, carefully placed each one in his basket. The chickens had settled in for the night, barely stirring as he worked. Everything was routine. Everything was ordinary. Until it wasn't. The first torch appeared at the tree line like a demon's eye opening in the darkness. Then another. And another. Soon the entire border of his property blazed with fire, each flame held high by white-robed figures emerging from the shadows. They moved with the confidence of men who believed they owned the night. Eli straightened slowly, his bulk casting a massive shadow in the torchlight. He counted quickly, at least 100 men, their rifles glinting dully in the firelight. The sight of their hoods didn't surprise him. He'd known this day was coming from the moment he'd bought this land. Sheriff Halverson's voice carried clearly across the yard, unchanged from how he spoke at town meetings. "Mercer, we know you're out there. Best come to your house now. We've got business to settle before sunrise." Eli's eyes caught the glint of the sheriff's badge, pinned proudly over his white robe. Beside him stood Reverend Matthews, his hood pushed back to show his face clearly in the torchlight. No shame, no need to hide. The law and the church, standing together with the Klan, making their message clear. This was justice in their eyes. More torches appeared, completing the circle around his property. The flames cast dancing shadows across the white hoods, making them seem to shift and writhe in the growing darkness. The air filled with the smell of kerosene and pine tar. "Your time's up, boy," another voice called out. "Shouldn't have gotten ideas above your station." Eli moved toward his house with exaggerated caution, letting his limp show more prominently than usual. His hands trembled visibly as he climbed the porch steps. Just another frightened colored man. Exactly what they expected to see. He could feel their satisfaction at his apparent fear, taste their certainty that this would be easy. The wooden boards creaked beneath his weight as he reached his front door. Behind him, the circle of torches tightened, drawing closer to the house. The sound of multiple rifles being cocked cut through the evening air like steel on bone. "Turn around, Mercer," Sheriff Halverson commanded. "Face us like a man." Eli's massive frame filled the doorway as he turned. Torchlight caught the sweat on his dark skin, making it gleam. His hands rose slowly above his head, fingers spread wide to show they were empty. His eyes remained downcast, his shoulders slumped, the very picture of submission. "Please," he said, his voice trembling just enough. "I don't want any trouble." Laughter rippled through the mob. This was the Eli Mercer they knew, or thought they knew. The big, simple man who shuffled through town with his eyes down. The harmless giant who spoke so soft and moved so slow. Their torches cast his shadow huge against the house behind him, but they saw only what they expected. A man too dull to be dangerous, too fearful to fight back. Eli stood motionless on his porch, hands raised high, while the circle of flames drew closer. His bulk seemed to shrink under their gaze, becoming smaller, lesser, safer. Everything they saw confirmed what they believed, that size meant nothing without spirit, that strength meant nothing without will. They saw exactly what he'd spent years teaching them to see. Sheriff Halverson stepped forward, his badge catching the torchlight. "You know why we're here, Mercer. This land's too good for your kind. Time to set things right." Eli's massive frame seemed to shrink further as he spoke, his voice barely carrying across the yard. I got papers for this land, paid fair and square. Papers don't matter tonight," Deputy Earl Denton called out, pushing to the front of the crowd. His hand rested eagerly on his holstered pistol. "Only thing that matters is what's right. And you owning this dirt ain't right." Eli's hands trembled more visibly above his head. What if I signed it over? The land, the house, everything." His words came out rushed, desperate. "Just let me go north. Never come back. Y'all can have it all, legal and proper." A moment of silence fell over the mob. Several hooded figures exchanged glances. The promise of profit had interrupted their darker purpose. Pastor Gideon Crow stepped forward, his hood pushed back to reveal his severe features. "Now, Brother Denton, perhaps we should consider this offer. If our colored friend here is willing to admit his inappropriate aspirations and depart peacefully, would that not better serve the Lord's purpose?" "Peaceful?" Deputy Denton spat on the ground. "Ain't nothing peaceful about letting him walk away." "Send the wrong message." His hand tightened on his pistol grip. "The message," Pastor Crow's voice carried the weight of the pulpit, "would be that divine order prevails without unnecessary violence, that when confronted with righteous authority, even the misguided can choose the proper path." Sheriff Halverson raised his hand for silence, taking control of the situation. "Mercer, you're saying you'll sign over everything? House, land, equipment, all of it?" "Yes, sir." Eli nodded quickly, his bulk swaying slightly. "Got the deed inside. Can write up the transfer proper, witnesses and all. Just let me go after. Please." More murmuring swept through the crowd. 20 acres of prime Delta soil was worth a small fortune. The thought of claiming it legally, without mess or questions, held obvious appeal. Deputy Denton wasn't satisfied. "Sheriff, you can't seriously—" "I can, and I will," Halverson cut him off. "This here's a matter of property now, and that makes it my jurisdiction." He turned back to Eli. "We'll return at dawn, Mercer. Have those papers ready to sign. Any tricks?" He left the threat unfinished. "No tricks," Eli's voice quavered. "I'll have everything ready. Just don't hurt me." Pastor Crow nodded in satisfaction. "See how reason prevails? The Lord provides a path for all to walk in accordance with their proper station." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Dawn it is, then. Time enough for our friend here to prepare himself for his journey north." Some of the mob grumbled. their bloodlust frustrated by this turn toward business. Deputy Denton's face twisted in barely contained rage. "Dawn," Sheriff Halverson confirmed. "And Mercer? Don't get any ideas about running. We've got men watching every road out of the county." Eli's head bobbed in fearful acknowledgement. "Yes, sir. I'll be here. Got nowhere else to go, anyhow." Laughter rippled through the crowd, cruel and confident. They began backing away, torches still held high, maintaining their circle as they retreated toward the tree line. "Enjoy your last night in that house, boy," Deputy Denton called out. "Come sunrise, it'll belong to white folks, like it always should have." More laughter followed his words. The mob moved as one into the darkness, their torches creating a ring of fire that slowly widened as they withdrew. Soon only their flames were visible, dancing among the trees like malevolent spirits. Eli remained on the porch, hands raised until the last torch disappeared into the woods. Only then did he lower his arms, movements still slow and careful. He turned, opened his front door, and stepped inside. The lock clicked shut with quiet finality. Inside the dark house, something subtle shifted in Eli's posture. The fearful slump of his shoulders eased. His movements lost their exaggerated caution. His massive frame no longer seemed to apologize for its own existence. He stood in his darkened front room, perfectly still, perfectly straight, as the sound of horses and wagons drifted in from the distant road. The mob dispersing, confident in their victory, certain of what tomorrow would bring. Minutes after the lock clicked shut, Eli moved through his darkened house with precise, silent steps that betrayed none of his earlier clumsiness. He lit a single oil lamp, keeping the flame low. The weak light caught the gleam of well-oiled wooden floorboards near his bed. His thick fingers traced a nearly invisible seam. With practiced ease, he lifted 3 boards, revealing a deep cavity beneath. The lamp's glow illuminated metal that hadn't seen daylight in years. From the hidden space, Eli withdrew items one by one, arranging them on his bed with methodical care. A Springfield M193 rifle, its stock marked with notches only he could decode. 3 Colt M1911 pistols, each cleaned weekly despite 2 decades of disuse. Boxes of ammunition, carefully wrapped in oiled cloth to prevent moisture damage. More items emerged. A leather gun belt worn smooth by years of combat. A military compass, its brass case dulled but mechanism precise. Webbing and pouches that still carried the mud of French trenches. Each piece told its own story of the war that had shaped him. Eli ran his hand along the rifle's barrel, remembering. 20 years ago, he'd stood before lines of white soldiers at Camp Shelby, teaching them the art of precision shooting. They'd called him Big Eli then, too, but with respect rather than mockery. He'd been the best marksman in the South, possibly the entire Army, a fact carefully omitted from official records after the war. Some of those same men now wore white hoods and burned crosses. He'd recognized voices tonight, beneath the bravado and hate. Men he'd trained to shoot straight, to breathe steady, to kill with purpose. Men who'd returned home to find they couldn't stomach a black man owning better land than theirs. A soft knock at the back door interrupted his thoughts. 3 taps. Pause. 2 more. Caleb Johnson's signal. Eli moved silently to the door, gun in hand, though he knew the boy's footsteps by heart. Caleb slipped inside, his young face grave in the lamplight. "Mr. Eli, they ain't planning to honor that deal. Overheard Deputy Denton talking with some others at Carter's Creek. They're coming back before dawn to burn you out." Eli nodded slowly. He'd expected as much. "You took a big risk coming here, son." "Had to warn you." Caleb's eyes moved to the weapons laid out on the bed. "You ain't really planning to sign over the land, are you?" "No." Eli began checking each pistol's action, the movements automatic after countless repetitions. "But you need to go. Whatever happens tonight, you can't be here." "I could help. My daddy taught me to shoot." "Your daddy taught you to survive." Eli cut him off gently. That's what you need to do now. Go home. Stay there. If anyone asks, you haven't seen me since yesterday morning. Caleb hesitated. They'll kill you. A ghost of a smile crossed Eli's face. They'll try. He picked up one of the pistols, checking the sight alignment. You know why I got so fat after the war, Caleb? The boy shook his head. Because fat men scare no one. Fat men who talk slow and walk with a limp, they're harmless, invisible. They get underestimated. Eli's voice remained soft, but something cold and precise had entered it. I've spent 20 years being harmless, watching them, learning their patterns, their habits, their weaknesses. He began loading magazines with steady hands. They see what they expect to see. A scared black man who got above his station. They don't see the man who trained half their shooters, the man whose name got whispered in the trenches. Each bullet slid home with a metallic click. They erased that man from the books, made him disappear. What are you going to do? Caleb whispered. Eli checked his watch. Just past 2 a.m. I'm going to remind them why they worked so hard to make me disappear. He looked up at Caleb. Go home, son. Whatever you hear tonight, stay inside. Whatever they say tomorrow, keep quiet. You understand? Caleb nodded slowly. Yes, sir. He moved to the door, then paused. Mr. Eli? Make sure they remember. After Caleb left, Eli continued his preparations. Each movement was precise, unhurried. He laid out ammunition at key points throughout the house, checked and rechecked his weapons, studied sight lines through windows, calculated ranges to trees, fences, outbuildings. The darkness outside his lamp's glow was absolute. Somewhere in that darkness, 100 men waited, confident in their power, certain of their purpose. They had torches, numbers, and the law on their side. They had everything except the truth of who they were hunting. The lamp's flame flickered as Eli methodically loaded another magazine. The moon had set, leaving only starlight to pierce the thick delta darkness. From his upstairs window, Eli watched shadows move through his fields. The clansmen's white robes caught what little light remained, making them easier to track than they realized. Eli had positioned himself carefully. Years of working this land had taught him every angle, every dip, every advantage. Through his rifle scope, he counted at least 30 men approaching from the west, moving in loose groups of 3 or 4. Their confidence made them careless. He steadied his breathing, remembering the techniques he'd taught countless soldiers. 4 counts in, hold, 4 counts out. His finger rested beside the trigger, not on it. Not yet. A whispered voice carried from below. Spread out. Surround the house. Eli recognized Deputy Denton's drawl. The man had been a poor shot during training, always rushing his shots. Some habits didn't change. The deputy gestured broadly, silhouetted against the tree line, making himself an easy target. But Eli waited. Patience had kept him alive for 47 years. It would serve him now. The first group reached his south fence. One man stumbled on the wire Eli had strung at ankle height. The curse was loud in the pre-dawn stillness. Others turned at the noise, bunching together, exactly as Eli had planned. His first shot wasn't meant to kill. The rifle crack split the night, and the fence post beside the grouped men exploded into splinters. They scattered, shouting in confusion. 2 more shots in quick succession kicked up dirt at their feet. "Sniper!" someone yelled. "Get down!" Eli was already moving to another window. 20 years of practice let him step silently despite his size. He'd memorized every creaking board, every loose nail. In the darkness, he was a ghost. From the north side of the house came the sound of breaking glass, someone trying to enter through a window. Eli smiled grimly. He'd left that window unlocked deliberately, with a tripwire just inside. A crash and curse told him the wire had done its job. More shots rang out, but they were wild, undisciplined. Bullets thudded into the house's thick walls, or went high into the night. Eli's return fire remained measured, precise. He never aimed to kill, not yet. Instead, he herded them like cattle, using fear and confusion as weapons. A flicker of movement caught his eye. Someone was trying to reach the barn, probably planning to set it ablaze. Eli's bullet splintered a support beam inches from the man's head. The would-be arsonist fled, torch dropped and forgotten in the dirt. From his hidden position near Carter's Creek, Caleb Johnson watched the chaos unfold. The boy had disobeyed Eli's order to go home, instead positioning himself where he could see both the house and the main road. He witnessed the clan's confident advance dissolve into disarray. Through his rifle scope, Eli spotted Sheriff Halverson attempting to rally his men. "It's just one old black," the sheriff shouted. "Form up! Form!" Eli's shot kicked dirt onto the sheriff's robe. The man dove for cover, his authority evaporating as quickly as his courage. By 4 a.m., the night had become a symphony of confusion. Eli moved methodically through his house, firing from different positions, never staying still long enough to be targeted. He'd trained these men, or men like them, and he knew their weaknesses. They expected confrontation, direct resistance. Instead, they faced a ghost who seemed to be everywhere and nowhere. Some men fled outright. Others huddled behind trees or farm equipment, unwilling to advance or retreat. A few braver souls tried coordinated attacks, but Eli's carefully placed shots always disrupted their plans. Near the creek, Caleb watched a group of clansmen half carry a limping companion toward the road. The man's white robe was stained with mud and blood, likely injured jumping a fence in panic. Others were scattered through the fields, their formation broken, their confidence shattered. Dawn was approaching when Pastor Crow finally called for a retreat. The remaining men fell back to the tree line in ragged groups, maintaining what dignity they could. Their torches had long since burned out or been dropped. Their white robes were stained with dirt and fear. Eli watched them regroup through his scope. He counted fewer than 60 now. The rest had fled into the night. Those remaining huddled in small clusters, their body language speaking of confusion and growing anger. They had come expecting to find a helpless victim. Instead, they'd found the deadly marksman they'd tried to erase from memory. The eastern sky was beginning to lighten. Soon, darkness would no longer provide cover. Eli knew the night's true test was still to come. The clan's humiliation would demand blood, but for now, he had shown them something they couldn't forget. The fat man they'd mocked was a phantom in the dark, a teacher of death they'd tried to forget. In the growing light, Eli reloaded his weapons with the same methodical care he'd shown all night. The morning would bring its own challenges, but he had made his point. They would never again mistake his patience for weakness. The first rays of sunlight crept across Eli's fields, turning the morning dew to gold. The change was sudden, darkness giving way to harsh clarity. White robes that had been ghostly in the night now stood out like targets against the green cotton plants. Through his scope, Eli watched the remaining clansmen shift uneasily. Their confident formation from the night before had devolved into scattered clusters. Some pressed against trees, others crouched behind farm equipment. All of them knew that daylight had made them visible. "Spread out!" Sheriff Halverson shouted from behind a tractor. "Don't bunch up!" Eli's response was immediate. His first shot of the morning caught a man square in the shoulder as he tried to move between positions. The precision of the shot, exactly where Eli had aimed, sent a clear message. The wounded man screamed, clutching his arm as blood stained his white robe. "Dear God!" Pastor Crow's voice carried across the field. "Thompson's down!" Two men rushed to help their fallen companion. Eli's next shot kicked up dirt between them, forcing them to scatter. His third shot clipped another man's leg as he ran. The message was clear. Movement meant targeting. Panic spread through the clan's ranks. Someone fired wildly toward the house. Others joined in, their shots unfocused and desperate. Bullets thudded into wood or whistled harmlessly overhead. Eli remained methodical, each shot placed with surgical precision. "Watch your fire!" Deputy Denton screamed as bullets from his own side nearly struck him. "You're shooting at us!" A bullet from somewhere in the chaos caught one of the Klansmen in the back. As he fell, his hood came loose, revealing the face of Marcus Wheeler, the bank manager. Blood spread across his robe as his companions dragged him to cover. "They're shooting their own!" someone yelled. "There's more than one shooter!" Eli switched positions, moving to another window. The sun was higher now, harsh light eliminating shadows. Through his scope, he watched the disorder spread. Klansmen fired at movement in their own ranks, trust dissolving into paranoia. Sheriff Halverson tried to restore order, standing up to rally his men. His hood slipped, exposing his face to anyone watching. Eli's shot exploded the ground at his feet, driving him back to cover. The sheriff's authority evaporated as he scrambled away on hands and knees. "Fall back!" Pastor Crow called out. "Everyone fall!" Eli's bullet caught him in the thigh. The pastor's hood came off as he fell, his face contorted in pain and fury. Several men ran to help him, but accurate fire forced them back. The pastor lay exposed, his true identity visible to all. More hoods came off in the chaos. William Tate, the hardware store owner, George Preston from the feed store. Faces that smiled at Eli in town now twisted with fear and hatred in his fields. "It's a trap!" someone shouted. "They planned this!" The accusation sparked immediate argument. Groups turned on each other, decades of hidden grievances erupting in the stress of combat. Two men grappled briefly, their hoods falling away to reveal brothers from a prominent family. By mid-morning, the cotton fields had become a graveyard of white robes stained red. 4 men lay dead, their bodies unclaimed by their retreating companions. Others crawled or limped through the rows, trying to reach safety. The sound of sporadic gunfire mixed with groans of the wounded and shouts of accusation. "Who's really shooting?" Deputy Denton's voice cracked with fear. "This ain't right." More shots answered him, from the Klan's own ranks. Trust had completely broken down. Every movement drew fire. Every shadow held potential betrayal. Men who had arrived as hunters now fled like prey, unsure who was friend or foe. Eli maintained his precision throughout, his shots serving as punctuation to their chaos. He picked his targets carefully. A knee here, a shoulder there. Each bullet a reminder of skill they had chosen to forget. The retreat became a rout. Small groups broke away, abandoning their wounded. Some threw off their robes entirely, running openly through the fields. Others crawled through the cotton rows, trying to stay low. The proud unity of the night before had shattered into every man for himself. Sheriff Halverson made one last attempt to organize a withdrawal. "Fall back to the road! Together!" But there was no together left. His men were already running, their formation destroyed, their confidence shattered. Some fled north, others south. Decades of racial solidarity crumbled under the weight of fear and exposed faces. Through his scope, Eli watched them scatter. The morning sun was merciless, illuminating every stumbling retreat, every abandoned companion, every moment of cowardice. The mighty Klan had become nothing more than frightened men in dirty white robes, fleeing from shadows of their own making. The late morning sun beat down mercilessly on Eli's fields. The air hung thick with gun smoke and the metallic scent of blood. Where chaos had reigned minutes before, an unsettling quiet now settled over the cotton rows. Only the occasional moan of the wounded disturbed the silence. Eli moved cautiously through his house, checking each window with practiced efficiency. His movements were precise, methodical, the same careful rhythm that had served him during the war. 4 dead lay scattered across his land. More wounded had crawled away, leaving dark trails through the cotton plants. He found Caleb in the root cellar, exactly where he'd ordered him to stay. The young man's eyes were wide but steady. "They're gone?" Caleb asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Most of them," Eli replied, helping him up. "The ones that could still run." Together they emerged into the harsh daylight. Eli kept his rifle ready as they made a careful circuit of the house. Bullet holes peppered the wooden walls, but the structure remained solid. His preparations, the reinforced shutters, the angled boards behind crucial walls, had done their work. "Look there!" Caleb pointed to where 2 abandoned clan robes lay crumpled in the dirt. Blood had turned the white fabric rust-colored. "They just left them." "Pride dies quick when survival kicks in," Eli said quietly. He studied the tree line where the mob had first gathered the night before. Now it stood empty, the morning breeze stirring leaves that concealed their escape routes. They found more evidence of the clan's collapse as they checked the perimeter. Dropped rifles, some expensive, scattered ammunition, a pocket watch that Eli recognized from the bank. The owners had fled with nothing but their lives and their exposed identities. "Never seen nothing like it," Caleb said, keeping close to Eli as they walked. "Way you handled them, made them turn on each other." Eli shook his head. "They did that themselves. Fear just showed what was already there." He paused to study a spray of bullet holes in the dirt. "All those years acting superior, but they broke just like anyone else when the tables turned." The morning's events had proved what Eli had learned in the war, that his deadliest weapon wasn't accuracy, but the ability to make enemies destroy themselves. He'd never wanted to use those skills again, but they'd stayed sharp through years of patient practice. Moving through the cotton rows, they found more signs of panic. Footprints showed where clansmen had fled in all directions, no order to their retreat. Shell casings from wild shooting littered the ground. Here and there, blood drops marked where his careful shots had found their targets. "Some saying you was the best shot in the South during the war," Caleb ventured carefully. "Some say a lot of things," Eli replied. "Being good with a rifle ain't nothing to brag about. Just means you're good at hurting people when you have to." They reached the edge of his property where the cotton fields met the road. Tire tracks carved deep ruts in the dirt, where vehicles had sped away. The morning sun highlighted the chaos of the retreat, how order had dissolved into desperate flight. "You think they'll come back?" Caleb asked. Before Eli could answer, a distant sound made them both stiffen. Sirens wailed somewhere to the south, growing louder. "Get back to the house," Eli said quietly. "Clean up any shells or signs you were here. Then take the back trail home. Don't let anyone see you." Caleb hesitated. "What about you?" "I'll handle what's coming." Eli's voice was firm. "Your mama needs you home safe. That's what matters now." As Caleb hurried away, Eli watched the road where dust clouds marked approaching vehicles. The sirens grew louder, their wail cutting through the heavy morning air. He'd known this moment would come, had planned for it, just like everything else. Standing in his bullet-riddled fields, surrounded by the aftermath of violence, Eli felt no triumph. He'd survived, exposed his enemies, but the cost lay scattered across his land in blood and brass. The deadliest shooter in the South had lived up to his old reputation, not for glory, but necessity. The first black federal car appeared around the bend, sunlight glinting off its windshield. More followed close behind, their sirens drowning out the morning birds. Eli stood his ground as they approached, his rifle pointed safely down, watching the dust cloud grow. The federal cars pulled up in a cloud of red Mississippi dust. Doors opened in unison, and men in dark suits emerged, their badges catching the sun. They moved with practiced efficiency, spreading out across Eli's property without a word of greeting or explanation. The lead agent, a tall man with graying temples, approached Eli directly. "I'm Agent Morris, Federal Bureau. Put the rifle down, Mr. Mercer." Eli carefully placed his rifle on the ground. Two agents immediately stepped forward to retrieve it, handling the weapon like evidence rather than a tool of self-defense. "We've got reports of widespread unrest in the area," Morris said, his tone professionally neutral. "Multiple casualties, missing persons. Care to explain?" "My property was attacked," Eli replied evenly. "I defended myself." More agents were combing through the cotton rows now, marking shell casings with small numbered flags. Others photographed the blood trails and abandoned Klan robes. They worked methodically, documenting everything except the truth. "Caleb Johnson!" an agent called out, dragging Caleb from where he'd tried to slip away through the back fields. "Got another one here!" Eli's chest tightened as he watched them roughly handcuff the young man. Caleb's eyes found his, filled with fear and confusion. "He has nothing to do with this," Eli said firmly. "He's just a farmhand." Agent Morris ignored him, signaling 2 men to take Caleb to one of the cars. "We'll sort out everyone's involvement at the station. Right now, you're going to walk me through exactly what happened here." They led Eli around his property, making him detail each position, each shot. The agents took notes but asked no questions about the Klan's initial attack. Their focus stayed solely on his actions, his responses, his choices. 4 confirmed dead, an agent reported, approaching with a notebook. All prominent businessmen. 2 more missing, presumed wounded. Sheriff Halverson claims a peaceful gathering was met with unprovoked gunfire. Peaceful? Eli's voice carried no emotion. They came with torches and rifles. 100 men in hoods. "Convenient that no hoods remain as evidence," Morris remarked. "Just like it's convenient these men were shot with military precision. Almost like someone with combat training was involved." A commotion from the road drew their attention. 3 pickup trucks had arrived, filled with men Eli recognized from the night before, now wearing regular clothes, their faces exposed but twisted with hate. They began unloading gas cans. "Sir," one of the men called to Morris, "we're here to contain the situation. Fire department's orders." Morris nodded. "Keep it controlled. We don't want this spreading to neighboring properties." Eli watched in silent fury as the men, the same ones who'd tried to kill him hours before, began pouring gasoline along the edges of his cotton fields. The morning air filled with the sharp chemical smell. "This is my land," he said quietly. "My life's work." "This is an active crime scene," Morris corrected him, "and a potential powder keg for the whole county. Sometimes fire's the best way to prevent things from spreading." The first match struck. Flames raced through the cotton rows, hungry and bright in the midday sun. Smoke began to rise in thick black columns. The men with gas cans moved methodically, starting new fires, watching with grim satisfaction as Eli's world burned. From the federal car, Caleb pressed his face against the window, tears streaming down his cheeks. The agents kept Eli standing in place, forcing him to witness the destruction. His cotton, his livelihood, his independence, all turning to ash under official supervision. The heat grew intense as the fire spread. Eli's face remained impassive, but his hands clenched at his sides. He'd survived the night only to watch his enemies finish their work in broad daylight, wrapped in the protection of law and order. "Once the fire department gives the all-clear, we'll escort you to town for further questioning," Morris informed him. "In the meantime, you'll remain here under observation." The flames reached higher, consuming years of careful tending. Eli could name every row, every section of his fields. He knew the soil's moods, the way water flowed after rain, the spots where cotton grew thickest. Now it all vanished in smoke and fire. Through the heat ripples, he saw his attackers watching from their trucks, their faces finally visible in daylight. Some smiled. Others simply stared, their earlier fear replaced by the comfort of familiar power restored. The system had closed ranks around them, turning their failure into victory. The morning's triumph crumbled like ash in Eli's mouth as he stood, surrounded by federal agents, watching his dreams burn. The deadliest shooter in the South had won the battle, but was losing everything else, one burning row at a time. Late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the county jail's front steps as Eli emerged. His clothes still smelled of smoke, and his muscles ached from hours of sitting in a hard metal chair, repeating the same answers to the same questions. The agents had finally released him without charges, but with clear conditions. "You have until sundown to clear out of the county," Agent Morris had said, not looking up from his paperwork. "Consider yourself lucky we're not pursuing this further." Eli stood on the sidewalk, watching townspeople hurry past with averted eyes. Some had been in the mob last night. Others had simply watched his fields burn this morning. Now, they all shared the same careful blindness, the practiced art of not seeing. A black Ford pulled up to the curb. Lillian Johnson, Caleb's mother, sat behind the wheel. Her face was drawn with worry, but her movements were precise as she got out and opened the trunk. "They're still holding Caleb," she said quietly, "but I have something you need to see." She lifted out a battered wooden box, its edges worn smooth with age. Eli recognized the military markings on its side, the same unit designation he'd served under during the war. "Found this in Marcus Thompson's attic last week while cleaning," Lillian explained as they sat on a nearby bench. Marcus had been their regiment's quartermaster, one of the few who'd treated black soldiers with basic dignity. "He passed last month. His widow asked me to sort through his papers." Eli opened the box carefully. Inside lay yellowed papers, official documents, and bundles of letters tied with faded ribbon. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted out the first file. "Training reports," Lillian said. "Marksmanship evaluations, commendations that never made it to official records." Marcus kept copies of everything. Eli scanned the pages, seeing his name again and again. Top marksman in the regiment, advanced tactical instruction, specialized training of white officers. His throat tightened at the familiar handwriting of men long dead. "There's more," Lillian continued, pulling out letters. "Correspondence between officers about your abilities, about why certain accomplishments needed to be adjusted in the final records, and this." She handed him a thick envelope, sealed with wax but never opened. The address was in Marcus's hand, "To be delivered to E. Mercer in the event of my death." Inside was a detailed account, names, dates, locations, of every attempt to erase Eli's wartime reputation. Officers who'd learned from him, then returned home to join the Klan. Officials who'd altered documents. Systematic efforts to ensure no one remembered that black soldiers had not just served, but excelled. "Marcus knew what they might do," Lillian said softly. "He kept proof. Waited until he was beyond their reach to share it." Eli read through page after page as the afternoon light faded. Here was evidence of not just individual crimes, but an entire system of erasure. The same system that had burned his fields this morning rather than acknowledge his right to defend himself. "What will you do?" Lillian asked. Eli carefully replaced the papers in the box. The sun was sinking toward the horizon, his deadline approaching. Violence had won him nothing but ashes. But truth might reach further than any bullet. "There are people who need to see these," he said. "Journalists, lawyers, people who can use words instead of weapons to make change." Lillian nodded. "I have contacts up north, people who've been gathering similar evidence, building cases." "They tried to erase me twice now," Eli said, watching the townspeople hurry past. "First my service, then my land. But paper holds memory longer than soil." He stood, lifting the box. The weight of its contents felt right in his arms, heavier than a rifle, but capable of doing more damage to those who deserved it. "Caleb?" he asked. "They'll release him tomorrow, once you're gone," Lillian replied. "I'll make sure he's safe." The sun touched the horizon, painting the street in shades of red. Eli looked one last time at the town that had tried to destroy him. He had survived their violence, but he would not answer it with more of the same. The deadliest weapon was not his marksmanship, but the truth they had tried so hard to bury. "Time to go," Lillian said gently, starting the car. Eli placed the box carefully in the back seat. As they drove toward the county line, he watched the sunset paint the sky in colors like fire. Behind them, the town grew small and dark, its secrets now safely contained in ink and paper, waiting to be exposed. The morning sun had barely cleared the horizon when Eli boarded the northbound bus in Memphis. He kept the wooden box close, protected between his feet as the engine rumbled to life. Other passengers paid little attention to the large, quiet man in the back row. That was fine. Anonymity had become a familiar comfort. The headlines started appearing 2 weeks later. Small notices at first, tucked away in northern papers. Federal investigation opens in Mississippi. County officials face scrutiny. The stories never mentioned his name or ranch, focusing instead on documented irregularities, missing records, and questionable finances. In his rented room in Chicago, Eli spread Marcus Thompson's papers across a borrowed desk. Lawyers came and went, taking copies, connecting threads. They spoke in careful terms about institutional accountability and systematic reform. Eli recognized the language of patience. Some victories required time rather than speed. By early autumn, the ripples reached deeper. Sheriff Halverson submitted his resignation, citing health concerns. 3 county commissioners stepped down within a week. Pastor Crow's congregation arrived one Sunday to find the church doors locked and their leader gone, leaving only questions and empty collection plates. Deputy Earl Denton vanished more quietly. Local gossip suggested he'd moved to Texas or maybe Oklahoma. No one seemed entirely sure. Similar uncertainties surrounded other men who'd stood in the torchlight that night. Their absences accumulated like leaves dropping in fall, natural, unremarkable, yet changing the landscape completely. The documentation proved more damaging than any bullet. Marcus Thompson's meticulous records revealed networks of corruption extending far beyond one county. Each paper trail led to another, then another. Bank records showed suspicious patterns. Property transfers raised questions. Old military files highlighted discrepancies that demanded explanation. Eli watched it unfold from a distance, working as a mechanic in a small garage on Chicago's South Side. His hands, once so precise with a rifle, now rebuilt engines with the same careful attention. The work suited him, methodical, requiring focus and patience. His new neighbors knew him only as a quiet man who kept to himself, but was always willing to help with repairs. Letters arrived regularly from Lillian, updating him on changes back home. Caleb had taken over management of a successful farm 2 counties over. The local clan cell had fractured, its members turning on each other as investigations tightened. Some faced tax charges, others fled ahead of subpoenas. The night of the siege was never officially solved, but its shadow lay heavy across every resignation and disappearance. In November, a thick envelope arrived from one of the lawyers. Inside was a copy of a sworn deposition, 30 pages of testimony from a former Klan member, detailing years of orchestrated violence and corruption. The man's conscience had finally outweighed his fear. More depositions followed, each adding weight to the growing case. Eli stored these papers with Marcus Thompson's records, watching the box fill with new evidence. The truth was like water, he realized, finding every crack and seeping through. No system, no matter how entrenched, could stay watertight forever. By winter, the changes were undeniable. The county had a new sheriff, one who'd never worn a hood. The church reopened under different leadership. Farms that had been seized through intimidation were quietly returned to their rightful owners. No official ever acknowledged the full story, but everyone understood the message. The old ways were ending. Eli settled into his new life, with the same deliberate care he'd once used to sight a target. His small apartment filled gradually with carefully chosen items: books, tools, a comfortable chair by the window. He attended veterans' meetings sometimes, though he rarely spoke. Other men who'd served recognized something in his bearing, but they never pressed for details. On a cold December morning, exactly 4 months after the siege, Eli read the final headline: "Federal investigation concludes, reforms implemented." The article mentioned no names, no specific incidents. It spoke only of systematic changes and improved oversight. To most readers, it was just another dry story about bureaucratic processes. But Eli understood the true victory. It wasn't in spectacular moments or public revenge. It was in the steady accumulation of truth, in the patient pressure of facts against lies. The system that had protected men like Sheriff Halverson hadn't been destroyed in a blaze of gunfire. It had been dismantled piece by piece, document by document, resignation by resignation. His name appeared nowhere in the official record. That, too, was a kind of victory. He had become what he'd always pretended to be: unremarkable, forgotten, just another face in the crowd. But now, it was by choice, rather than necessity. In his pocket, he carried a single sheet from Marcus Thompson's records, his original marksmanship scores, unaltered. Not as a reminder of what he could do with a rifle, but of what patience and precision could accomplish, no matter the weapon. 5 years after leaving Mississippi, Eli stood at the entrance of a converted warehouse on Chicago's South Side. The sign above read simply, "Veterans Marksmanship Association." Inside, the long space had been transformed into a proper shooting range, with lanes marked clearly and safety equipment stored neatly along the walls. Morning light filtered through high windows as his students, all black veterans, arrived for their weekly session. They came from different backgrounds: former infantrymen, mechanics, medics. Some still carried visible wounds from their service. Others bore scars that didn't show. All of them understood what it meant to hold power and the weight of using it wisely. "Morning, Mr. Mercer," called James Wilson, a young man who'd served in the Pacific. He walked with a slight limp, not unlike Eli's own. Behind him came the others, 12 in total today. Eli nodded, watching them prepare. They moved with practiced discipline, checking equipment, adjusting safety gear. No rushed movements, no wasted motion, just like he'd taught them. "Today we're focusing on breath control," Eli announced, his voice carrying easily in the quiet space. "A shooter who can't control his breathing, can't control his aim. And a man who can't control his aim has no business holding a weapon." The men lined up, listening intently. Eli demonstrated the proper stance, the way to regulate breathing under pressure. His hands, thick but precise, moved through familiar motions. The veterans watched closely, recognizing the authority of experience. "Remember," he continued, "this isn't about how fast you can shoot or how many targets you can hit. It's about mastery of yourself first, then your tool." He patted the rifle on the bench. "These are just pieces of metal. The real weapon is up here." He tapped his temple. One by one, the men took their positions. Eli moved down the line, correcting stances, adjusting grips. His touch was gentle, but firm, each correction delivered with quiet certainty. When they began firing, the shots came slowly, deliberately. "Good, Marcus," he said to a tall man at the end. "You're rushing less. Let the shots surprise you." Marcus nodded, adjusting his grip slightly. His next shot landed closer to center. During a break, the men gathered around as Eli cleaned a rifle, his movements automatic after decades of practice. Some of them knew pieces of his story, whispered fragments about Mississippi, about a night when patience proved deadlier than rage. But Eli never spoke of it directly. Instead, he taught through example. Every session began with safety checks, ended with thorough cleaning. He emphasized precision over power, control over speed. The lessons went beyond marksmanship. A gun makes noise, he told them, reassembling the rifle. But noise doesn't equal strength. Anyone can make noise. The real power is in knowing when not to shoot, in having the discipline to wait. The men nodded, understanding deeper meanings. Many had faced similar choices, moments when violence seemed the only answer. Eli taught them alternatives, ways to maintain dignity without destruction. After the formal practice, some stayed to help clean up. Eli watched them work together, sharing quiet jokes, offering advice. They'd formed a community here, built on mutual respect and shared experience. "Mr. Mercer," James approached as the others began leaving. "I wanted to thank you, not just for the shooting lesson." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "My temper used to get the best of me. But what you taught us about control, about patience, it's changed how I handle things." Eli nodded, understanding perfectly. "Anger burns fast," he said. "Patience endures." He'd learned that lesson the hard way, through years of calculated restraint. Now he passed it on, helping others find strength in stillness rather than fury. The afternoon light slanted through the windows as the last students gathered their belongings. Eli stood at the door again, watching them leave. They walked differently now than when they'd first come. Straighter, calmer, more assured. Each carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who knew his own capabilities and, more importantly, his own control. A police car rolled past slowly, a common sight in this neighborhood. 5 years ago, such a patrol might have sparked tension. Today, his students simply nodded politely and continued on their way. They'd learned that true power didn't need to announce itself. Eli watched until the last man turned the corner, then began his final checks of the range. Each lane was cleaned, each weapon secured. The routine was comforting, like the steady rhythm of breathing before taking aim. I hope you found that story powerful. Leave a like on the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. I have handpicked 2 stories for you that are even more powerful. Have a great day.